Welcome to the field sessions and mini lecture on rich moist forest. This is probably the part you've been most waiting for, because most people associate spring wildflowers with the flowers under the towering forests on the forest floor. Things like mayaples, trilliums, spring beauties, things of that sort. We will get into those now in these following field sessions. Well, what are the characteristics of these plants? They need a deep soil, or deep, rich soil. It needs to be loamy with more or less equal parts of clay and sand, silt, and humus. And the humus comes from decaying leaves and wood on the forest floor. These soils tend to be more or less neutral, varying from slightly acidic to slightly alkaline, but not extreme in either case. These plants are perennials with stored energy in rootstocks. Now, if they are early spring blooming, they have the largest reserves of any of these plants, and they also use flower and leaf buds that were formed in the previous season. So as a result, they are able to burst forth rapidly to produce the plants and the blooms. And they do this before the leaves of the canopy actually bud out and form a shade. However, late spring flowers are somewhat different. They are fairly rapidly growing, but not as fast. They also do not use stored buds. They have to grow the flowers and most of the leaves that they are going to have on them. So this has to develop as the shade of the canopy is starting to form. As a result, these plants are able to get enough light to sustain the growth, to get the energy and the food that they need for growing to maturity as the canopy is starting to darken. You might notice also that these plants tend to have broad leaves that are able to do that. Now, in terms of deep summer shade, both these groups, early spring flowers and later spring flowers, tolerate deep summer shade. So as the summer comes on, their metabolism slows down to a crawl. They're not producing very much energy. All that they're doing is sort of maturing the fruits and then restoring the reserves in their rootstocks. And so this basically takes all summer to do that. As the fruits mature and the reserves are produced, after that, then the leaves in the top part of the plant tend to wither and dry up. They have an ability to grow through the forest floor litter, so they have to be tall enough to get up above that. So they tend to be about calf high or knee high. However, there are some plants that actually flower with their flowers down in the litter, like little brown jugs. But the leaves on these plants, however, are on long petioles, so they stick up above the litter. The early spring flowers that have under the open canopy will tend to have insects that are smaller and need to be heated by the sun. So to keep active, these insects have to have the sunlight as well. The later spring flowers are under light shade, and they do not require these small insects that need to be heated so much, so they have a little bit larger pollinators. These insects have the greater protective cover of the canopy leaves and the leaves of the wildflowers themselves. So that's one reason why they tend to be larger. Seed dispersal, it's usually of two types. One is being carried by birds, mammals, or larger insects as they are devouring the fruits, or sometimes part of the seeds, other seeds, or the seeds inside the fruits get carried to other areas. Or there is mechanical devices, explosive or wind-shaken capsules that disperse the seeds. Well, those are the characteristics of the plants. What about the forest habitats themselves? Let's look at that. Now, these rich, moist forests develop in stream valleys and on the lower halves of slopes in ravines, and they can also be on north-facing higher slopes. This is where deeper, richer soils develop because erosion bringing soil downhill to them. And there's greater moisture, which also helps the richer soils to develop. And as you might expect, they are going to be below on downslope from where the drier forests are upslope. The most important rich moist forest type are the cove forests, which we discussed earlier in the course. I might mention that besides the dominant trees, you will find eastern hemlocks, often along stream courses in these cove forests. Before the chestnut blight decimated the American chestnut in the southern Appalachians, that tree was a towering dominant tree in these forests. Now, in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and that includes the Smoky Mountains, there's also another large towering tree called mountain silverbells. This tree is going to be found in the cove forests that develop on fairly gentle valley slopes in the mountain foothills and in the mountains, as well as in some broad north-facing slopes. Now, if we go to the Tennessee River Valley and the Cumberland Plateau, we don't have as much elevational change, and here the forests have a greater proportion of oaks and hickories in the cove forest. They are going to be primarily developed on river bottoms, narrow ravines, and at the base of bluffs. And also there's going to be a more rapid transition between the moist, rich forest at the bottom to the dry forest, which are not that far up above the lower rich forest. Now, one thing I should mention is that in the Tennessee Valley, many of the cove forests that were in the river bottoms have been cleared for agriculture, and so those are really no longer available. So, now the actual forest types, we have yellow birch forest. These high elevation forests are actually less diverse and have a lower canopy that's more open than the cove forests. However, they are rich and moist by virtue of the fog and mist and snowfall and rain that they get up on the upper slopes. And the cooler temperatures also helps to slow down the breakdown of the leaf litter, so there's a lot of leaf litter available. Now, even though the dominant vegetation in the yellow birch forest is different from the cove forest, still lots of the same species of wildflowers are in these forests that you find in the cove forest. And finally, there are conifer forests at the high elevations where the soil is thick enough. We did not actually go into the conifer forest for this course. This is because these forests tend to be much less rich in wildflower species. They have a dense canopy that shades the floor all year long, and they tend to have very acidic soils, really limiting the number of wildflowers. But the wildflowers that you find there in particular will be look for species of terrestrial orchids if you go into those forests. So there you have a rundown on the rich forest, and we'll now spend about 4 sessions looking at the plants there.